It started with something I can't even explain properly, like a quiet pulse in my chest every time I saw those clothes neatly folded in my sister's room. I didn't know why they drew me in so strongly. It wasn't about wanting to be her or even to look like her, it was something deeper, a strange, thrilling pull toward something I was never supposed to touch. My family had always been strict about roles and appearances. My father believed in what he called proper presentation, which basically meant looking and acting as masculine as possible. My mother went along with it, though I could tell she didn't always agree. My sister, Lila, was the opposite: bold, expressive, free. She wore whatever she wanted, did her makeup like it was an art form, and never apologized for being herself. I admired that about her more than I ever said out loud. It happened one evening when everyone was out. The house was quiet, that kind of stillness that makes you hyper-aware of every sound you make. My parents had gone to visit relatives, and Lila was at a sleepover. I should have been doing homework or playing games, but instead, I found myself wandering into her room. I don't even know what I told myself as I opened her closet door. Maybe I was just curious. But when I saw the dresses hanging there, the soft fabrics, the shimmer of certain colors under the light, I froze. My heart started pounding. I reached out and ran my fingers along one of them, a pale lavender dress, light and smooth, like it belonged to another world. For a moment, I just stood there holding it, feeling its weight in my hands. I looked toward the door as if expecting someone to walk in, but of course, no one did. That was when I made the choice, the one that changed everything. I slipped out of my t-shirt, pulled the lavender dress over my head, and let it fall into place. The feeling was indescribable. It wasn't just the softness of the fabric or the way it brushed against my skin, it was like an invisible layer of myself I'd never seen before had suddenly become visible. My reflection in the mirror startled me. I didn't look like me, and yet somehow, I looked more like myself than I ever had. I remember smiling, then quickly covering my mouth like I'd done something terrible. I twirled just a little, shyly, almost like I was testing what it felt like to move that way. The reflection smiled back, a secret version of me I hadn't known existed. For the first time, I didn't feel trapped by how I was supposed to be. I felt alive. But that joy came with fear too. The thought of anyone finding out terrified me. Especially my father. So I made sure no one ever did. Or at least, that was the plan. I started sneaking small moments when the house was empty, trying on little things, first a scarf, then a skirt, then makeup I'd secretly bought with leftover allowance money. I got good at hiding it. I'd clean everything carefully, put things back exactly as I found them, double-check every trace. It became my secret ritual, a quiet rebellion that no one knew existed. But secrets like that don't stay hidden forever. One evening, after a long day at school, I came home early because classes got cancelled. No one was supposed to be back for hours. The thought crossed my mind before I even reached the front door. This was my chance. I went straight to my room, locked the door, and brought out the things I'd carefully stashed away: a soft pink sweater, a pleated skirt, a necklace I'd borrowed once and never quite returned. I slipped into them piece by piece, my heart beat fast but steady. Then I turned toward the mirror again, only this time I didn't see guilt. I saw peace. A fragile, trembling kind of peace that made my throat tighten. But then I heard it, the sound of footsteps in the hallway. My heart stopped. They weren't supposed to be home yet. I rushed to change, fumbling with the buttons, my hands shaking so badly that I dropped the necklace. Before I could hide everything, the door creaked open. It was Lila. She froze when she saw me. The silence that followed was unbearable. My mind screamed with panic. I was sure she'd laugh, or worse, tell our parents. But she didn't. She just stood there, her expression unreadable. Then slowly, she closed the door behind her and said softly, "You look beautiful." I didn't know what to say. My face felt hot, and I tried to stammer something, anything, but nothing came out. Lila stepped closer, her voice calm and gentle. "How long have you been doing this?" she asked. I hesitated, then whispered, "A while." I expected anger, but instead, she smiled, a knowing, almost sad smile. "You don't have to hide this from me," she said. Those words hit harder than I expected. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear them. That night, She didn't scold me. She didn't tease me. Instead, she helped me adjust the clothes properly, fix the hair I'd messed up, even gave me a little lip gloss to finish the look. It felt surreal, like a dream I didn't want to end. When I looked in the mirror again, I saw something whole. Someone who wasn't pretending anymore. After that day, things changed. Lila became my secret ally. We'd talk late at night, quietly, so no one would hear. She'd show me how to blend makeup, how to walk with confidence, how to see beauty without shame. For a while, it felt like I was living two lives, the one everyone saw and the one that made me feel real. But keeping it hidden started to weigh on me. Every time I wiped off the makeup or folded the clothes away, I felt like I was erasing myself. Then came the night of the accident. Our parents were away for the weekend, and Lila and I decided to order pizza and watch a movie. I was dressed, as usual when it was just us, in one of her older dresses. Everything felt light, ordinary. But then there was a knock at the door. Our neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, who'd come over unexpectedly to drop something off. Before I could change, she saw me. She didn't say much, just a polite smile and a curious glance, but I knew what she'd seen. The next day, I heard my father on the phone with her, his tone growing darker by the second. He came into my room afterward, eyes blazing. "Is it true?" he demanded. "You were wearing your sister's clothes?" I froze, my throat dry. I wanted to explain, to make him understand that it wasn't wrong, that it made me feel like myself, but I couldn't form the words. He shouted, said things I wish I could forget. My mother tried to calm him down, but it didn't help. That night, I thought it was all over. But Lila stood by me. She defended me when no one else did. "He's not hurting anyone," she told them. "He's just being himself." My father wouldn't hear it. He forbade me from ever doing it again. He called it a sickness, a phase. I nodded, pretended to agree, but inside I knew I couldn't go back to pretending. For a few weeks, I stopped. I packed everything away, focused on school, avoided eye contact with everyone at home. But something inside me started to break down. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus. It felt like I was losing myself again. Lila noticed, of course. She always did. One night she came into my room, carrying a small box. She set it down on my bed and said, "I know you promised, but I also know this isn't something you can just erase." Inside the box were a few simple things: a small mirror, a soft scarf, and a note that read, "Be you, even when it's hard." I cried that night. Not because I was sad, but because someone finally saw me and didn't try to fix or hide me. Slowly, quietly, I started to rebuild that secret part of myself, not as rebellion but as truth. I'd change when I knew everyone was gone, not to defy anyone but to remind myself that I existed beyond expectations. The fear never went away completely, but alongside it grew something stronger: acceptance. Years later, after I'd moved out, Lila and I stayed close. My parents took longer to come around, but time softens things. They stopped mentioning what happened. My father and I barely spoke for months, until one day he asked me to help fix the car. We worked in silence, but when I stood up, he looked at me and said quietly, "You look happy lately." That's good. It wasn't approval, not fully, but it was something. Looking back now, I realize that what started as a forbidden thrill became something far more powerful. It taught me who I was when no one was watching. It taught me courage, the kind that isn't loud or dramatic, but steady and real. Sometimes I still think about that first moment, standing in front of the mirror in the lavender dress, trembling between fear and wonder. That version of me was terrified, but also free in a way I can't fully describe. If I could speak to that younger version of myself now, I'd tell them this: you don't have to hide from what makes you feel alive. You don't have to apologize for wanting to feel whole. The world might not always understand, but there will be people who do. And the parts of you that feel forbidden, those are often the most honest ones of all. Even now, when I open my closet, I sometimes pause and run my fingers across the fabrics, feeling that same quiet pulse I did years ago. It's not about secrecy anymore, it's about peace. The thrill isn't from hiding. It's from knowing I survived the fear and came out stronger. Because in the end, the most forbidden thing I ever wore wasn't the clothes, it was the truth of who I really was. And learning to wear that, openly and unashamedly, has been the most thrilling secret of all. After that turning point, life didn't suddenly become perfect. It wasn't like a movie where everyone learns to accept you overnight. There were still quiet stares, awkward silences, and moments where I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. But the difference was this time, I wasn't running from myself. I started taking small steps toward being open, even if it meant risking misunderstanding. It began one rainy afternoon when I was in college. I'd been there a few months, away from home, trying to figure out who I could be when no one from my past was around to judge me. The rain was pouring outside, and I remember sitting by the window, looking at my reflection in the glass. For so long, I'd been living as two people, the one everyone saw and the one I kept hidden. I didn't want to split anymore. So I made a quiet decision. I would stop hiding, even if that meant being afraid again. The first time I walked outside in clothes that truly felt like me, I thought my heart would burst from my chest. It wasn't a dramatic outfit, just a soft cream sweater and jeans that fit differently from what I used to wear. But to me, it felt like stepping onto a stage in front of the whole world. Every sound seemed louder, every look sharper. My hands trembled as I adjusted my bag strap, wondering what people would think. But no one stared. No one said anything. Life just went on. That silence felt like freedom. Still, there were challenges. Some days were harder than others. I remember one morning in class when a group of students whispered after glancing my way. I caught a few words: that guy, dressed weird, confused. My stomach dropped. I wanted to disappear. But then, from across the room, someone smiled at me. A girl named Evelyn. She didn't say anything, didn't make it a big deal, just smiled. That small moment felt like a lifeline. After class, she caught up with me. "You have good style," she said, casually, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I must have looked shocked because she laughed softly. "Relax," she said. "It's just a compliment." We started talking after that. She had a calm, kind energy, someone who didn't need to fill silence with noise. She became one of the first people I ever told my secret to outside my family. I still remember her exact response. She just nodded and said, "That must have been hard to hide for so long." No judgment. No pity. Just understanding. It was Evelyn who encouraged me to attend a campus art show one night, themed around self-expression. I hesitated at first, afraid of what it would mean to be seen. But I went. I wore what felt right: a flowing shirt, soft colors, something in between what people expected and what I wanted. Standing there, surrounded by paintings and photographs about identity, I felt part of something bigger. Like everyone there had their own version of a secret they were learning to live with. Later that night, I found myself in front of a painting titled Unfolding. It was abstract, layers of color peeling away, revealing brightness underneath. I stood there for a long time, unable to move. It reminded me of what I'd been through: the fear, the secrecy, the slow peeling away of layers until the truth finally saw light. I didn't even notice Evelyn walk up beside me until she whispered, "It looks like you." That sentence stayed with me for years. Things weren't easy at home still. My father and I barely spoke for a long time after that night years ago. But eventually, time wore down the walls. He wasn't cruel anymore, just quiet. One winter break, I went home wearing a simple cardigan that could have been seen as either masculine or feminine. I braced myself for comments, but he just asked how college was going. It was small, but it mattered. Acceptance doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes in silence that no longer feels heavy. The real test came the summer after graduation. My family planned a reunion, and I was expected to attend. I knew everyone would be there: uncles, cousins, people who hadn't seen me since before I'd changed. I spent days worrying about it, pacing my small apartment, holding different clothes up to the mirror. Should I tone myself down to make things easier? Or should I show up as who I really was? I thought about the years I'd spent hiding, about the lavender dress, the box Lila gave me, Evelyn's smile. And then I knew my answer. When I arrived at the reunion, my heart was pounding, but I held my head up. The dress I wore wasn't extravagant: soft blue, simple, but undeniably me. The chatter in the room quieted for a moment as I walked in. A few curious looks, a few raised eyebrows. But then Lila came up and hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm so proud of you." That's all I needed. Later that evening, I found myself sitting on the porch, away from the noise. The sunset painted everything gold, and for a moment, I just breathed. My father stepped out quietly. I expected tension, but he didn't say anything for a long time. Then, finally, he sat beside me and said, "You look comfortable." I turned to him, unsure how to respond. He looked at the horizon and added, "I used to think I'd lost my son. But now I see I just didn't understand you. Maybe I still don't. But you're happy, right?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He gave a small nod back, and that was it. No dramatic apology, no sudden understanding, just a quiet bridge being rebuilt. Now, years later, I sometimes look back on all of it, the fear, the thrill, the secrecy, and it feels like a different lifetime. What once felt forbidden is now part of who I am, openly and without shame. I work at a design studio where creativity is celebrated, and no one questions how I present myself. Evelyn and I still talk often. She says I inspired her to be more honest with herself too. And Lila, she remains my anchor, the first person who ever told me I was beautiful when I felt like I shouldn't be. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I still take out that old lavender dress. I don't wear it anymore, it's fragile, the fabric a little faded, but I keep it as a reminder. Not of what I hid, but of how far I've come. Because that dress wasn't just clothing. It was the beginning of a journey toward understanding myself, toward learning that the scariest truths are often the most freeing. I've learned that being yourself doesn't always mean shouting it to the world. Sometimes it means quietly existing without apology. Sometimes it means showing up in a room and letting your presence say what words never could. And sometimes it means forgiving those who hurt you, because they didn't know any better. My story isn't about rebellion anymore, it's about peace. It's about finding a place in the world where I no longer need to hide behind locked doors to feel real. And when people ask me how it all began, I tell them the truth. It began with a forbidden piece of fabric, a mirror, and a trembling heartbeat. And it became a life. Sometimes I think about the sound the rain made that first night I ever dared to wear something that wasn't allowed. It's strange how memories work, the tiny details stick more than the big ones. The faint hum of the old ceiling fan, the lavender smell of my sister's lotion, the creak of the floorboard outside her room. Back then it felt like the universe was holding its breath with me, waiting to see if I'd have the courage to take that one step. Years have passed since then, and life has moved forward in ways I couldn't have predicted. I live in a small apartment now, filled with light and quiet music. The closet that once terrified me to open is now a mix of colors and fabrics I once only dreamed of touching. And every time I slide the hangers aside and run my hand along the smoothness of silk or the softness of cotton, I remember that long journey from fear to peace. But even peace has its shadows. There are still days when I wake up with a dull ache inside, a question that never quite goes away. What if I'd never taken that first risk? What if I'd stayed hidden forever? Would I have survived in that small, locked version of myself? Sometimes I think the real bravery wasn't in wearing the clothes, but in deciding that my truth deserved space in the world. Last year, I was invited to speak at a small community event. The topic was authenticity and identity, and though I wanted to say no, afraid, as always, of being seen too clearly, something inside told me it was time. I walked into that hall, hands shaking, and saw a few dozen faces waiting quietly. Most were strangers, but a few looked just like I once did, scared, curious, hoping someone would say it was okay to exist as they are. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and told the story. Every part of it. The nights of hiding. The guilt. The fear. The moment my sister didn't laugh. The day my father finally stopped looking at me with disappointment. As I spoke, I saw heads nodding, eyes softening, even tears glinting under the lights. I realized then that my secret had never been just mine. So many of us carry the same quiet wish, to be seen, to be accepted, to live without apology. After the talk, a young person came up to me, their voice trembling the same way mine had once trembled. "I thought I was the only one," they said. I smiled and told them what I wish someone had told me long ago: "You never were." That night, Walking home under the streetlights, I felt something I hadn't felt before. Not thrill. Not fear. Something gentler, belonging. The kind that doesn't need to be proven. The kind that just is. I visited my family a few months later. My father's hair had gone grey around the edges, and my mother's hands had grown softer. We sat on the porch again, the same one where he'd once struggled for words. Only this time, there was no tension. Just the hum of cicadas and the smell of jasmine from my mother's garden. Lila joined us, laughing about something small, and for a brief moment, everything felt whole. When I stood up to leave, my father looked at me and said quietly, "You know, I never understood it all. But I see how at peace you are now. That's enough for me." It took years to reach that moment. But it was worth every second of waiting. I don't think about forbidden anymore. I think about freedom, the kind that doesn't shout but whispers through the way you carry yourself, the way you breathe, the way you choose to live truthfully even when it's hard. The thrill I once felt sneaking into Lila's room has transformed into something softer, steadier. A quiet pride. Sometimes, I still pull out that lavender dress. The color has faded a little with time, and the threads are delicate, but when I hold it, it feels alive. It's not just fabric. It's the story of who I was, who I am, and who I'm still becoming. I stand in front of the mirror, the same way I did all those years ago. Only now, I don't see someone caught between worlds. I see one whole person. No more hiding. No more pretending. Just me, flawed, real, and unashamed. And maybe that's the real secret, the most thrilling thing of all. Not the clothes. Not the makeup. Not even the transformation itself. It's the realization that being true to yourself was never forbidden in the first place. It only felt that way until you dared to do it. When people ask me now why I tell my story so openly, I tell them because silence almost swallowed me once. Because there's always someone out there standing in front of a mirror, terrified and trembling, wondering if they're allowed to exist as they are. And if they hear this story, if they hear that someone else stood in that same fear and survived, it might just give them the courage to breathe, to try, to live. So yes, it began as a secret. But it ended as freedom. And the freedom feels like standing in sunlight for the first time, wearing something soft, something honest, and realizing you no longer need permission to shine.